Today's story isn't just about tariffs or politics. It's about food prices, farming survival, and how one country quietly turned economic threats into long-term advantage. When Donald Trump threatened very severe tariffs on Canadian fertilizer, the assumption was that Canada would negotiate or back down. That didn't happen. Instead, Canada did something far more strategic. It diversified. This is the story of how American agriculture became trapped by geological reality, how Canadian potash became an irreplaceable resource, and how Canada used U.S. trade threats to build permanent alternatives. I'm Daniel Harper, and if you appreciate in-depth, data-driven analysis like this, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, so you don't miss the stories that truly matter. Trump threatened very severe tariffs on Canadian fertilizer, gave $12 billion to American farmers hurt by his own trade war, and Mark Carney responded by selling more potash to Brazil, China, and India instead. United States farmers need Canadian potash. 90% of American potash comes from imports, 80% of that from Canada. Saskatchewan sits on 1.1 billion tons of reserves, 5 times larger than United States reserves. American farms use 5.3 million tons annually. Canada produces 22.9 million. Trump threatening tariffs on the one resource American agriculture cannot replace. Then wondering why food costs keep rising. Carney's response was not negotiation, not compromise. Diversification. Brazil now takes 14% of Canadian potash exports. China takes 8%. India buying more every year. Saskatchewan producers shipping to Asia instead of waiting for Trump's next threat. 11.5 billion in annual potash exports. And Trump learned threatening Canadian fertilizer means American farmers pay higher prices while Canadian producers find new customers. This is how Canada used Trump's threats to build permanent alternatives. But before we dive into this story, if you appreciate in-depth analysis like this, hit that like button and subscribe to stay informed on the stories that truly matter. Trump announced $12 billion bailout for American farmers, called it bridge assistance. Farmers facing steep losses because Trump's trade war with China killed soybean exports. Fertilizer costs up 11%. Crop prices down. American Soybean Association predicting third consecutive year of losses. Farmers expecting to lose $150 per acre on average. 15 billion in total nationwide losses. Third consecutive year, not one bad season. 3 years of losses. Systematic collapse of American farm profitability under Trump's trade policies. The bailout covered row crop farmers, corn, soybeans, wheat. 11 billion distributed by end of February. 1 billion held back for fruits, vegetables, other crops. Government finalizing details, but 12 billion does not cover 15 billion in losses. Math does not work. Farmers still losing money even with government handouts. Subsidy masking disaster. Not solving problem. At same White House event announcing the bailout, Trump threatened Canadian fertilizer. Said a lot of it comes in from Canada. Said we will end up putting very severe tariffs on that if we have to. Claimed tariffs would force United States to make own fertilizer. Just produce domestically. You will be making your own fertilizer, he told farmers. Problem solved in his mind. Reality completely different. Trump launched Department of Justice probe, simultaneously accusing Canadian companies of price fixing. Nutrient Saskatchewan-based fertilizer giant became primary target global producer of potash. Trump claiming foreign companies engaging in anti-competitive behavior, driving up costs for American farmers, tariffs, and investigations at the same time. Maximum pressure, campaign intimidation strategy. Force Canada to lower prices or face legal consequences, plus tariffs. Except Canadian companies not fixing prices. Global commodity prices respond to global demand. Basic economics Trump refuses to understand. American farmers panicked immediately. Iowa. Senator Chuck Grassley pleaded with Trump, begged President to exempt potash from tariff, said family farmers get most potash from Canada. Grassley knows his constituents represents farming state. Iowa corn and soybean farmers depend on Canadian potash. No viable alternative exists. Russia supplies 8 to 10% of remaining American demand. Belarus under sanctions. Domestic production 400,000 tons annually against 5.3 million tons needed. Gap cannot be filled. Grassley understands agricultural reality even if Trump does not. Fertilizer Canada responded bluntly. United States does not have sufficient reserves to meet domestic demand. Canadian reserves 1.1 billion tons. American reserves 220 million tons. 5 times difference. Not something tariffs can fix. Not something domestic production can replace. Geological reality. Potash deposits took millions of years to form. Cannot manufacture them with executive orders. Cannot tariff them into existence. Saskatchewan sits on massive reserves. Montana and North Dakota have some deposits. Not enough. Not economically viable at scale needed. Josh Linville, Vice President of Fertilizer at Stone X, explained the problem clearly. Unlike other tariffs where seller bears cost, potash different. Canada supplies nearly 90% of potash imported into United States. Few viable alternatives exist. The problem is, if we start to upset Canada, where else around the world do you start to go? He asked. To our second biggest supplier, that is Russia. Russian potash only accounts for 8 to 10% of total United States demand. Not reliable alternative under sanctions pressure, political complications, supply, uncertainty. Canada only real option for American agriculture. Bill Knudsen, professor at Michigan State Department of Agricultural Economics, said any tariff pushes price up and farm profits down. Just about any crop uses potash in some ways, he explained, going to reduce profitability, already looking at decline in farm income, especially for field crop producers in upcoming year. Tariff makes bad situation worse. Farmers losing money on current fertilizer prices. Higher prices from tariffs guarantee larger losses. More bailouts needed. More taxpayer money transferred to farmers. Cycle continues. Fertilizer accounts for 30 to 45% of United States farmers' annual operating cost depending on crop. Massive expense. Critical input. Cannot reduce application without reducing yields. Cannot skip fertilizer year. Soil depletes. Crops fail. Potassium essential nutrient. No substitute exists for potassium in plant growth. Farmers cannot pass rising input cost to consumers because they sell into commodity markets. Corn, wheat, soybeans. Prices set globally. Chicago Board of Trade. Futures markets. Individual farmer has zero price power. American farmer pays more for fertilizer, gets same price for crops, loses money. Trump's tariff threat guaranteed higher costs for American agriculture with no revenue increase to offset. Trump previously imposed 25% tariff on Canadian goods early this year. Chaos resulted. Outcry from industry. Republican lawmakers from farming states revolted. Grassley led charge. Other senators joined. Farm state representatives threatened political consequences. Trump backed down partially, lowered fertilizer tariff to 10%, still damaging but less catastrophic than 25%. Outcry worked because farmers made clear they cannot operate without Canadian potash. Physical impossibility, not negotiating position, actual agricultural requirement. Trump backed down partially, but threat remained. Very severe tariffs still possible. Uncertainty damaging. Farmers cannot plan, cannot budget, cannot sign contracts. Policy volatility kills agricultural business. November 14th. Trump signed executive order eliminating tariffs on most fertilizers. Good move according to Fertilizer Canada. Industry praised decision. Farmers relieved. Prices stabilized. Then December 8th threatened very severe tariffs again. 3 weeks later, complete reversal. Policy volatility whiplash. Expanding or building new fertilizer plants costs billions of dollars and takes years. Nobody invests when president changes policy every few weeks. Threatens tariffs. Removes tariffs. Threatens again. Investigates companies. Drops investigations. Changes mind constantly. Investment requires stability. Long-term planning. Predictable regulatory environment. Trump provides chaos, uncertainty, random threats. No investor commits billions under those conditions. Carney watched Trump threaten American farmers with higher fertilizer costs, did not negotiate, did not offer concessions, did not plead for exemptions, focused on export diversification instead. Strategy he announced in October. Double non-United States exports from 300 billion to 600 billion over next decade. Potash perfect candidate for diversification. Global demand growing. Asian and Latin American markets expanding rapidly. United States market relatively static. American potash consumption over past 25 years, mostly steady, deviates with marginal shifts in corn acreage and farm income range between 7.5 million to 9.5 million tons annually. Flat market, no growth. Why focus on market that does not grow and threatens tariffs? Constantly better. Strategy focus on markets that grow and want Canadian products. Brazilian demand. Surging Brazil, largest agricultural exporter globally. Exports soybeans, corn, coffee, sugarcane, beef, poultry, feeds the world, but imports 85% of fertilizer requirements, 100% of potash imports. Brazil has no domestic potash production. Must import everything. Cannot grow crops without imported potassium. Brazil consumed 8% of global fertilizer in 2021. Domestic production covers only 15% of needs. Relies on imports from Canada, Russia, Belarus. Canadian potash exports to Brazil, now 14% of total Canadian exports, up from negligible share decade ago. Growth market, reliable customer, pays on time, honors contracts, long-term relationships. Brazil launched national fertilizer plan to reduce import dependency, but that takes decades. Meanwhile, needs Canadian potash, lots of it, growing amounts every year. India, similar story. Second largest fertilizer consumer globally after China. Uses 30.6 million tons of nutrients annually. Massive agricultural sector. Feeds 1.4 billion people. 100% of potash imported. India has no domestic potash deposits. Geological reality must import everything. Cannot grow rice, wheat, vegetables without imported potassium. Canadian exports to India growing steadily. Reliable supplier. Quality product. Long-term contracts. India prioritizes supply security over lowest price. Willing to pay premium for guaranteed delivery. Remember supply disruptions during Ukraine war. Understand strategic vulnerability. Diversifying suppliers. But Canada remains critical partner. Indian government subsidizes fertilizer to keep food prices low. Political necessity. Coalition government cannot risk food price inflation. Needs reliable potash supply. Canada provides that reliability. China largest potash consumer globally. Significant domestic production, but still imports massive quantities. Canadian exports to China, 8% of total Canadian exports. Room to expand significantly. China needs Canadian potash for rice, wheat, vegetables, cotton. Population 1.4 billion people. Food security paramount. Communist Party legitimacy depends on feeding population. Canadian potash helps China feed itself. Strategic relationship beyond just commerce. Indonesia, South Korea, Malaysia, Japan all importing Canadian potash. Asian agricultural economies expanding, population growing, food demand increasing, fertilizer consumption rising across Asia-Pacific. Saskatchewan potash producers shipping to region, building relationships, establishing supply chains, long-term contracts protecting against United States market volatility. Saskatchewan potash production 22.9 million tons in 2024. Record production. United States consumed roughly 9 million tons of potash imports annually. Even if United States tariffs all Canadian potash tomorrow, Saskatchewan producers ship remaining 14 million tons to other markets immediately. Brazil, China, India, Southeast Asia, waiting. Global demand 76.1 million tons annually, growing to 80 million by end of decade. United States represents shrinking percentage of global market. Nutrient announced plans for export terminal in Longview, Washington. 5 to 6 million tons annual capacity, $1 billion investment. Washington State provides access to Asian markets. Faster shipping to China, Japan, South Korea. Nutrient shipping Canadian potash through American port to Asian customers. Bypassing United States domestic market entirely. Canadian company mines potash in Saskatchewan. Ships through Washington State port. Sells to China and India. Trump cannot tariff what does not enter American market for consumption. BHP advancing Jansen potash project in Saskatchewan. $23 billion invested already. First stage starts production 2027. 4.2 million tons annually. Second stage doubles capacity to 8.5 million tons by 2031. BHP targeting Asian markets exclusively, China specifically. Long-term contracts already negotiated. None of that production destined for United States. All exports to Asia Pacific. Canadian production expanding for non-American markets. Investment decisions made assuming American market unreliable. Trump's tariff threats driving investment away from United States dependence. Trump wanting United States to produce own fertilizer. Michigan Potash and Salt Company received $1.26 billion loan guarantee from Department of Energy. Biden administration approved it. Trump administration fast-tracking permits. Plans to produce 800,000 tons annually plus 1 million tons food-grade salt. Sounds significant until compared to 5.3 million tons. United States consumes annually, covers 15% of demand. Still need imports for remaining 85%. Still need Canada project costs, 1.3 billion government backing. Majority of cost taxpayer, funded even with massive subsidies, only produces fraction of needs. Sage Patch in Utah received $14 million grant from United States Department of Agriculture. Plans for 300,000 tons annual production. Combined with Michigan project, produces 1.1 million tons total. Still 4.2 million tons short. Still dependent on imports. Still need Canada. Trump's domestic production strategy cannot replace Canadian imports, even with billions in government subsidies. Geological reality. American reserves too small. Extraction costs too high. Timeline too long. Canadian potash exports worth $11.5 billion annually. 30% of global production. 41% of global exports. Strategic resource. Critical mineral. United States threatening tariffs on resource it cannot replace. Cannot produce domestically in sufficient quantities. Russia under sanctions pressure. Belarus sanctioned. Domestic reserves 5 times smaller than Canadian reserves. Dependency absolute. American farmers receiving $40 billion in government payments this year. Net farm income projected to fall by $30 billion in 2026 due to decline in government payments and low crop prices. Farmers dependent on subsidies. Subsidies masking damage from trade war. When subsidies decline, farm income collapses. Trump creating dependency on government handouts while destroying export markets that previously generated sustainable farm income. Canadian advantage permanent. 1.1 billion ton reserves. Mining infrastructure established. Production capacity proven. Export terminals operational. Shipping routes developed. Customer relationships built. Supply reliable. That advantage strengthens as Canadian producers diversify away from volatile American market into stable Asian and Latin American markets. Trump thought threatening Canadian fertilizer would force production onshore, force Canada to negotiate, force concessions. Instead, forced Canadian producers to find better customers. Brazil pays on time. India wants long-term relationships. China offers supply security premium. Asian markets growing faster, better business environment, less political interference, no tariff threats every few months, stable trading partners. Carney's export diversification strategy working as designed. Use American unreliability to build stronger relationships elsewhere. Brazil happy to buy more Canadian potash. China eager to secure food supply. India seeking reliable fertilizer source. Every Trump threat strengthens Canada's position with non-American buyers. Trump needs Canadian fertilizer, cannot replace it, cannot produce domestically in sufficient quantities. Geological reality cannot be negotiated. Reserves cannot be manufactured. Infrastructure cannot be built overnight. Trump trapped by agricultural reality. American farmers need potassium. Canadian potash provides potassium. No substitute exists, no alternative available. Mark Carney recognized that dependency, used it strategically by building alternatives, by diversifying markets, by reducing Canadian dependence on American buyers. 11.5 billion in annual potash exports, shifting from United States to Brazil, China, India, Asia, Pacific. Permanent strategic shift. Trump's threats accelerated inevitable trend. Global agricultural markets growing in Asia and Latin America. United States market static. Canadian producers following growth. Trump threatened very severe tariffs on Canadian fertilizer. Gave $12 billion to American farmers to compensate for his trade war damage. And Mark Carney responded by selling more potash to countries that actually want it. Brazil, China, India, Indonesia. Markets that pay on time, honor contracts, do not threaten tariffs. This is how Canada turns American threats into Canadian opportunities. This is how geological advantages become permanent strategic leverage. This is how you ignore Trump and build the future anyway.